All right, man. Peace. So there was a very good discussion about Larry Bird and about the impact that he's had as an American Caucasian basketball player. And the reason why they brought the conversation up was in reference to Gordon Hayward, who at the time of this conversation had not signed with Boston yet. But as we know, he has signed with the Boston Celtics to reunite with his former college coach. But let's see what they have to say about Larry Bird uh, in contrast to Gordon Hayward.
Gordon Hayward reportedly will make his decision today on where he'll be playing next season. The Heat, Celtics, and Jazz are the front runners for Hayward. Last year, Hayward averaged career highs in points and rebounds and made his first All-Star team. We're joined by Eddie House. Chris Broussard is back with us. Eddie, why do you think, if Hayward goes to Boston, there will be obvious Larry Bird comparison. So why do you think there hasn't been another American-born white player at the level of Larry Bird?
Well, that's a crazy question. First off, Larry Bird is one of the top 5 players to ever play. I mean, if we're talking non-center, you're talking about Jordan, Magic, and then to me, LeBron and Larry Bird right there with each other. All right, as far as non-centers to ever play. All right, Jordan, Magic, and then Larry Bird and LeBron James battling. That's how great Larry Bird was. Larry Bird was an unbelievable player.
I think it's too soon to even compare this guy to Larry Bird, number one. Larry Legend is, he's there's nobody like him. And I don't think there ever will be another like him. But
Really?
Yeah.
Absolutely not. I mean, come on. I mean, it's a disrespect to Larry Bird to try to limit him according to him being a Caucasian basketball player. All right, Larry Bird played in was the best player in the mid '80s in an era where you probably had the greatest small forwards in the history of the NBA. All right, he was going against Dominique Wilkins, Bernard King, Alex English, Dr. J, George Gervin, Dale Ellis, Mark Aguirre, James Worthy. Like the list goes on and on and on. Adrian Dantley. I mean, almost all those guys that I named were Hall of Famers, other than I think Dale Ellis and Mark Aguirre. Mark Aguirre should be in the Hall of Fame. All right. He was going against those guys every night. Chris Mullin came in the mid 80s. Larry Bird was a 10 out of 10 at everything except for obviously athleticism. Rebounding, if he wanted to, he can get 20 rebounds. If he wanted to, he can get 20 assists. If he wanted to, he can get 60 points.
Yeah, not another like Larry Bird. Larry was the ultimate competitor. He was a trash talker. He probably was the best trash talker in the NBA ever.
And, best ever.
So I'm not sure that. I think it's too soon to jump to the conclusion that Gordon Hayward is going to be the savior. I think he's a very good complimentary guy, very, very good guy, but like the second and third guy. But also look at the percentage of whites in the NBA is roughly at 10% right now, and it's the same way that Major League Baseball is at 7%. That's why you don't see an African American star in Major League Baseball, because it's just not that many of them. There are stars there, but it's not like it was from, I want to say, like 62, 60s and the 70s. It was all African American.
Well, let me say this, and it's not to digress, but a lot of so-called blacks have kind of left the game of baseball because basketball and football is more glorified. When I was growing up as a kid in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s, when I first started watching sports, baseball in particular, the so-called black man was dominating baseball. Right, Barry Bonds, Ken Griffey Jr., Kirby Puckett, Tony Gwynn, Fred McGriff, Darryl Strawberry, Eric Davis. I mean, even later on in the 90s, you had guys like Mo Vaughn come in the league, dominating. The so-called black man was dominating, but, it kind of started to fall off in the late 90s.
Americans. So I think that's what's playing a part in this, that the percentage of them are down in that league.
Okay, here's my theory, because I've thought a lot about this. can we agree, and not to stereotype, can we agree that for whatever reason, at this moment in time, black players are quicker, faster, jump higher?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, you can't say that, Chris. We can't agree with that because that's racist. That's what all the liberal blacks and liberal whites told me on the video where LeVar Ball said that UCLA lost because they had too many white players, which meant that their team was too slow. So you're not allowed to say that, Chris. Nope. Even though the NBA is 70% black and the so-called black man only makes up 6% of the U.S. population. No, you're not allowed to say that, Chris. All right? Even though Caucasian general managers and scouts proactively look for blacks over white players, that's racist if you say that the black man is a greater athlete, Chris. And if you do say that, it's because, remember, the Caucasian man bred us as slaves to be bigger, stronger, and faster during the 1800s, even though that would have been something that nobody with common sense would do, because then the slaves would rebel against them because they were bigger, stronger, and faster. But, you got to say whatever you need to say to try to justify why the so-called black man is greater athletically. And a lot of the dumbass liberal blacks, they follow behind that. But it is what it is.
Okay. Now, I think over the last 25 years or so, kind of since Michael Jordan, maybe even while he was playing, basketball in America has been geared more toward athleticism than ever. Okay, you got guys that really aren't that skilled who can run and jump, and they get drafted high and, things like that. Before that, remember, Magic wasn't like the greatest. He didn't win with his athleticism.
Did not.
Bird, obviously, it wasn't just athleticism. No. Oscar Robertson. It wasn't like you just said the guy that can really jump high and dunk and be quick is going to be the best player. It was more skills. But I think since Jordan, maybe because he was so athletic, it became more athleticism, okay? And I think if you look at the best white players, particularly in modern basketball history, Larry Bird, Chris Mullin, Kevin McHale, John Stockton, they were skilled. Rick Barry, it was skills. It wasn't that they were out jumping everybody, it was skills.
And even today it's skills. I mean, let's be for real. Steph Curry kind of has a, not the stereotype, but a quote-unquote Caucasian game, right? He has a game that's very relatable because he's not an explosive athlete. He's a greater athlete than people give him credit for, but he's not somebody who's going to dunk over people in traffic. He's not somebody who's just going to, astound you with his athleticism, right? I probably shouldn't say a Caucasian game. I should say more of a skills-driven game, because skills can be for any player. But in any era, your skills are going to dictate your greatness, not your athleticism. Larry Bird would be even more dominant today than in the era where he played. He'd be even more dominant today because he had a post-up game. He had a great left hand. He had great handle. And he could shoot anywhere from underneath the basket to 30 feet out. All right? He was an unbelievable passer. Only thing he couldn't do, really, was guard his man one-on-one, because he didn't have tremendously quick feet, but his athleticism is a little underrated because he had a 30-inch vertical, all right, which is the same vertical that Karl Malone had, somewhere between 28 and 30-inch vertical when he first came in the NBA. All right, with the training of today, he would have been an even greater player. Like I said, to me, the debate is not Jordan and LeBron. The debate is Larry Bird and LeBron. All right, that's the debate. Because right now, to me, they're on the same level. They've won the same amount of championships. Larry Bird won 3 straight MVPs. LeBron has never done that, even though he has one more MVP. Neither one of them have ever won Defensive Player of the Year. I think that their IQ is comparable, even though I think Bird had a greater IQ. I thought Bird was a greater passer, a greater shooter. Rebounding, I would say, is about equal. Athleticism is not even close. And the clutch, not even close. Larry Bird was probably the greatest clutch player to ever play, right there with Jordan. All right? So it's very, very close. Before the back injuries, Larry Bird was the most dominant player in the NBA. All right? From 83 to 86, he was the best player and the most dominant player in the NBA as far as his overall floor game. If you ask the bad boy Pistons, he was tougher to stop than Jordan was, because of the way that they moved the ball and the way he dominated the overall floor of the game.
Look at the best white players, period, today. Dirk Nowitzki, Steve Nash, Manu Ginobili. Now you got Nikola Jokic, Kristaps Porzingis. What is it? Skills. And I think in America...
Remember, you're talking about non-American white players.
So I'm saying in America, because the game is so focused on athleticism, the white American players kind of get caught up in that, judged by that, and they're not going to win or dominate based on athleticism. In Europe, they're teaching skills. And so those guys come over with more skills.
If you guys get a chance, if you haven't seen it already, on YouTube, look up Larry Bird NBA mixtape. That man was off the chain, man.
Agreed.
And they can become stars. Now, with Steph, with Clay shooting so well, they're good athletes, obviously, but not, great athletes. Right. Maybe the game will get more balanced and we'll go back to skills a little more, a combination of athleticism and skills. And maybe you'll begin to see more white players, be able to excel. If I had a white kid, or if I was telling a white kid what to do to make the NBA, I would say, man, focus on your skills.
Is that what you told your nephew? Because you're light, bright, damn near white looking ass. You got a white boy in your family, all right? Just cut the bullshit out, Chris.
And go play with black players at a young age.
I agree.
So you get used to it. You're not intimidated.
Yep.
I think all kids should focus on skills. That's the most important.
Absolutely. That's the point. The game is a skill game. The best players of all time have always been the most skilled. All right. Jordan wasn't great because he was the greatest athlete. He was the greatest because he had the highest skill level and the greatest athleticism. That's what makes him the greatest. Because if you look at the other guys in the top 10, in my top 10, I should say, guys like Tim Duncan and Larry Bird and Magic Johnson, none of those guys was going to jump out of the gym. But their skill level, the diversity of skills that they had were non-for-real. All right. Absolutely non-for-real. And let me say this to the Kobe Bryant guys. No, Kobe is not in the top 10, all right? He's not in the top 10, goddammit. He's somewhere in that 11 to 15 range, all right? Somebody keep telling me to do a video of my top 15 NBA players ever. I'll probably do that soon and go into detail with each player, all right? But no, Kobe is not top 10 all time. Larry Bird came to a team that was 21 and 61. And in 1 year, he turned that team into a 61 and 21 team. All right? That's what he did. He had 3 different coaches. He won championships with 2 different coaches. The third coach, Chris Ford, he was hurt most of the time when Chris Ford was there. Magic Johnson won championships with 2 different coaches and got to the finals with a third coach. All right? Even Michael Jordan went to the conference finals with Doug Collins. All right? And then, of course, won the 6 championships with Phil. You look at Kobe Bryant's record without Phil Jackson. All right? LeBron James been to the finals with what? How many different coaches? 4 different coaches? That's how you could tell the effect of a player. All right? Hakeem Olajuwon went to the finals with 2 different coaches. Now, you'll come back and you say, well, Tim Duncan is the greatest player at his position. Like I said, when you look at the top 10 of my top 10 all-time greatest players, all those guys you could argue were the best players at their position. If you really know the game, you know that you can even argue that Hakeem Olajuwon was the greatest center of all time. All right? If you took Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's finesse and skill level and combined it with Bill Russell's defense, you have Hakeem Olajuwon. For those of you brothers who really know the game, all right, you know what I'm talking about.
Important thing, not just white. I think every kid needs to focus on skills. Sure. Athleticism is only going to take you so far. Skills going to take you everywhere.
Chandler Parsons had a very good quote, and I'm quoting him. He said, the NBA is a collection of some of the most athletic guys in the world, and white guys just aren't that athletic.
Wait a minute. Chandler Parsons said what? All them liberal blacks and liberal white people, they got mad at LeVar Ball when he said what he said. They need to hear what Chandler Parsons just said. But, let me not forget, the white man bred blacks to be athletically superior to them. Allegedly.
For Larry Bird, upbringing matters. When you were born, where you were born, and how you were brought up plays a role. When the documentary that they talked about Larry Bird. He says, I grew up playing with older black men. They were talking trash. And they said, well, Larry, why do you want to play with them? He said, because that's where the best guys are. I want to be the best. So he was brought up playing against older black players, talking trash, honed his skill, his craft. When you look at Larry Bird could barely jump over a credit card. Larry Bird run, his knees didn't bend, he was shuffling. But he get to that spot and bust you up. Dr. J, the only time you saw Dr. J lose his cool, he said, Doc, I'm going to go in this corner, I'm going to pump fake you. And I'm going to shoot it. Now, next time I pump fake you, you ain't going to go for it. And I'm going to pump fake you again. And Doc said, well, you have to shoot it with one eye because I'm finna close one eye. Rock hit it with a 2-piece.
No, he was purposefully trying to provoke Doc in that game, and Doc finally gave him what he wanted, which was that ass whooping. All right? That's what he did. Larry went a little too far in that game. He was trying to piss Doc off, and he was mad because Philly had owned them pretty much for those, and Philly, they don't get as much credit as they deserve. Those Sixer teams in the early 80s who got to the finals 3 out of the first 4 years and probably had the best team of the decade with that 83 Sixer team. And Dr. J is another guy in that 11 to 15 range, right, along with Kobe. Right? People act like it's such an insult to have Kobe in that 11 to 15 range. Them guys in that range, like Moses Malone and Dr. J and Isaiah Thomas, those guys was right there with Kobe Bryant. Like, I'm sorry, those guys built legacies on their teams. Kobe Bryant inherited a legacy. Like, Isaiah Thomas went to a team in the Detroit Pistons that had no history. They had no he created the legacy on that team. All right? Dr. J went to a team that was filled with cokeheads and got them to the finals a whole bunch of times, I think 3 times before Moses Malone even got there as the leader of that team. All right? Same thing with Moses Malone, probably the most dominant center of the 80s. Man was dominant, got to the finals in 81, lost to Bird in 6, and then went to Philly and was the member of probably the most dominant team of the 80s, that 83 Sixer team. All right? The 4-4-4 team. I mean, it is what it is. A lot of you guys, like I said, especially you Kobe Bryant dudes, a lot of y'all don't know shit about what y'all talking about. And Kobe is a phenomenal player. But I don't think a lot of y'all know what you're saying when you say he's top 10 all time. Like, top 10 all time, like I said, is you could argue he's the greatest at his position ever. And just him on the team takes the team to a borderline championship level. And that is not Kobe. I'm sorry. You got to have so much shit around Kobe. I know I'm going to piss off a lot of you Kobe Bryant dudes. It is okay. It is what it is.
He could talk. I don't think, Skip, if you really didn't like Larry, and a lot of black people didn't like Larry Bird because he was white and he was busting up our black players.
As a little kid in the 80s, I hated Larry Bird. All right. I was a little boy back in the 80s. But if you were so-called black back then, you were Lakers all the way. The Lakers, that was the black team, quote unquote. But when you mature and you get an understanding of the game, you have a great respect. And I remember when I first started watching basketball, where I could, really understand what I was watching. I saw Bird in his last 2 years, and he was still dominant. He just had a terrible back ailment, where he really could barely play. But when he did get out there, he still dominated the game. And he was way slower those last 2 years than he was when he first came in the league, where he was already slow. But he was still dominating guys.
But if you go back and look at Bird, he thrived in what's arguably the greatest decade, the 80s and the early 90s, against some of the greatest black players to ever play. The Magics, the Kareem, the Michael Jordan. He was the one that won 3 straight MVPs. It was him, a guy that couldn't jump that high, but he'd go get you 24 and 12 every night, and get you about 7, 8 assists if you needed to be.
I think Shannon was on record as saying that Bird was his favorite player growing up. Bird was so incredible. Like I said, for you guys, if you get a chance, YouTube Larry Bird NBA mixtape.
Skip, the thing is that now black kids grow up and says, okay, I'm going to do on the up and up. What's the quickest way I can make money and make the most money? NBA, NFL. Because if you play baseball, you got to go to the minors. You play hockey, you got to go to the minors. So what's the quickest way I can ascend and get out of this poverty or get out of the situation that I'm in. There's not a whole lot of white kids growing up like Larry Bird in today's time. Look at Kevin Love. Kevin Love daddy was an NBA player. So the hard.
By the way, his uncle was a Beach Boy, so that helps.
Yeah, his uncle was a Beach Boy and a Luciferian who was associated with Charles Manson, if I remember correctly. I'm trying to remember his uncle's name. Obviously, his last name was Love. But he was a member of the Beach Boys, and he was associated with the monarch assassin known as Charles Manson, who was programmed in the Process Church, along with David Berkowitz and Sirhan and all them other assassins out there. All right. But yeah, he was a Luciferian. With the Beach Boys, they were a Luciferian group. But all those groups were Luciferians back in the 60s, especially out there in California. But that's a whole nother topic.
So hardship, scopes.
Yep.
Now, okay, I'm growing up hard. Take it from me. I was 3 years younger than my brother. So I'm playing basketball one-on-one against somebody that's 3 years older. Mm-hmm. My cousins were 4, 5, and 6. Mm-hmm. So if I play guys my age, I'm dominating. But I'm also talking trash because they talking trash to me. Mm-hmm. So that's how you learn certain things. So Larry got skilled at a very young age, playing against some of the black older men in French Lick, Indiana, talking trash. And you see a direct product of that, Larry Bird is the great. It's not even close. And another reason why we won't see another Larry Bird.
I think Rick Barry was close.
He was close.
But
I know him very well, and I know his game.
Yeah.
He could score like Larry, but he couldn't rebound. He was all around.
Well, he wasn't as tall. But think about it, he led the Warriors to the championship.
Hey, yes.
Averaged 30 points a game in 1975.
I agree with you.
No teammate averaged more than 14.
Yeah.
If somebody did that today, we'd be like, he carried a bunch of
Russell Westbrook did that this year.
Dirk kind of did it. Dirk did it.
But
kid was older.
I know Rick very well, did a radio show with him in the Bay Area. You want to talk about chip on shoulder? You want to talk about a bad man? You want to talk about a guy who will jump down your throat at a moment's notice? Ask Rob Parker. Correct? And that's the...
Somebody need to jump down Rob Parker's throat with his dumb ass. No way, no how.
That's the guy. Okay, so what's still stunning to me is that Rick played well before Larry Bird played. So let's go back just to Larry Bird. It's still stunning to me that there still hasn't been one American white player come even close to Larry Bird.
No.
I thought Tom Chambers was sort of in the ballpark a little bit at 6'10". He was a 4-time All-Star. He's a little before your time.
No, I know. But he was more athletic, Skip.
More athletic, but he was the MVP of an All-Star game in Seattle because everybody said, we're going to make you the MVP. But again, he was pretty good, but he wasn't Larry Bird, who, by the way, was top 10 in steals twice. So he could move. He had
great anticipation. Now, was Larry Bird a Monarch athlete? Who knows? I believe he may have been. There was a Sports Illustrated article that they did on him back when he was at Indiana State. And on the article, or pardon me, on the cover of the magazine, he's there with his index finger over his mouth, doing the shush sign, the Luciferian, quote-unquote, Masonic shush sign for Harpocrates, the god of silence, the god of secrets. So was he a program Monarch athlete? Most likely. You know, you look at his number and you look at a lot of other of his attributes, right? He was Bird, and the black guy was Magic. I already did a video on Magic and him most likely being a Monarch athlete, sent over to that handler, Jerry Buss. I'm sure that Red Auerbach was a handler as well. Into the Kabbalah, he was a so-called Caucasian Jew. But that's a whole other topic. And we'll deal with that. If I get a chance to go into the Larry Bird thing a little deeper, we'll deal with that when we get there. But he was a phenomenal basketball player.
He could play center field on defense. He couldn't on-ball defend.
No.
Okay, this is my unscientific theory about this, and I can't back it up. It's just a gut feeling, being a white guy, watching this evolution.
Skip always give them bullshit-ass introductions, being a white guy. You're not white, you're pink.
That over the last, let's say, 20 years, a lot of pretty good young white athletes got to age 12, 13. You've had your kids go through this stage just here recently, 12, 13, and They get in the gym with black kids and they'd say, you know what? I don't know if I can do this against those guys. So I think I'm going to gravitate toward baseball or football or hockey or soccer or whatever else. Lacrosse. You got it. And it wasn't that they were not very good athletes, but they didn't think they had the overall athleticism to compete and thrive and succeed in basketball. But Larry Bird was the ultimate aberration because, as you talked about, he grew up poor in French Lick, Indiana. And you want to talk about chip on shoulder? You want to talk about fighting at a moment's notice?
Yeah, Larry Bird whooped some ass. He used to fight. He used to like to fight all them. Anytime a white player messed with him, he'd definitely fight him. With the so-called black players, he would, he'd fight them too, but he would, he'd give them a little leeway because he had more respect for the black players. But if a white dude stepped to Larry Bird, they was fighting.
He was the greatest trash talker ever. I covered Mark Aguirre when he was with the Mavericks, and he used to tell me he dreaded playing Larry Bird the most because Larry would get in his ear from the opening tip and tell him I'm going to do this to you on this play. And he couldn't stop him because he had a shot that he shot completely behind his head. It didn't matter because he's like 6'9", but he played like he was 6'11".
Yeah, Larry Bird was about 6'10". I mean, they gave him 6'9", but he was. He got into a beef with Kareem in the '84 finals, and when they went to nose, he was damn near looking Kareem dead in his eye.
With that shot behind his head.
He showed up at the All-Star game and asked, which one of you guys finished in second?
No, I let me tell the story. I was there.
He didn't take your top off.
Wait a second. This is the 1986 three-point shootout in Dallas, Texas, and I know this from a Maverick official who was in the locker room while they were dressing for the three-point shootout. And the other competitors these are really good shooters. Craig Hodges, Trent Tucker, Dale Ellis, Sleepy Floyd, Leon Wood, Norm Nixon were the black guys in the locker room at that point. And he walked in and said, which one of you, and I'm not going to certainly say the word, is going to finish second? And you know what word I'm talking about. To me, it's the most evil word in the English language, and he got away with saying it, and not one of them even looked up.
I didn't know he said that either.
Right.
He got away with saying it. This is 1986.
I don't think you were in there?
No, I wasn't in the locker room, but a Maverick official came straight out and told me this story because he was dumbfounded that nobody said a word back to Larry Bird because there was some respect that he had earned already. I don't know what it was. Again, today, could Larry Bird get away with that? I don't think so.
No.
I hope
he
not.
got out.
No, first of all, he wouldn't have got out.
Yeah, but my point was he went right out and backed it up.
Yeah.
How true that story is, who knows? They claim that Bird used to, he used to talk a lot of shit to the that he used to talk a lot of shit to a lot of the so-called black players and use a lot of so-called black slang because he, as Shannon already testified, he grew up around a lot of so-called black dudes. According to Skip, he used the N-word to them in the locker room. I don't know how probable that is. We got to get the testimony of one of the guys who was in there, or Bird himself. That's really what a journalist should do, because that would be a great topic for a talking point if they can get Bird and ask him if he really did that.
Yeah. And he won the final 22-12 over Craig Hodges, who was an all-time
won it 3 times in a row.
Yeah, he was a great shooter. So that's the guy that you're dealing with, who was as fearless. Obviously, he wasn't intimidated by anybody of any color. He said, I can beat you doing what you do in my way.
Right.
I can do it my way. Yet I was at the Final Four, Magic Bird Final Four in Salt Lake City, and I'm in the Dallas Cowboys used to have a hospitality suite to everyone because they drafted college basketball players occasionally. So Gil Brandt introduced me to some of the top coaches. You know what I consistently heard? Larry Bird won't make it in the NBA. He's too slow-footed. I heard it from some of the top coaches in the country because they saw him. He can't jump over a credit card. And he looks slow-footed in college basketball, and he looks slow-footed in the NBA.
Yeah.
But you want to talk about skill, vision, perception, great passer, he averaged 10 rebounds a game for his career. Wow.
And he was sneaky quick.
Yeah.
And he knew
Sneaky
angles.
quick.
He was
Yeah.
sneaky quick and he used angles. Very smart basketball player. But to your point, as far as kids going into the gym and saying maybe I can't play with them, my kids are doing AAU basketball. My twins, they're 10 years old. They'll be 11. And their basketball team, all black. People that they play, all different ethnicities. It's not really an all-white team. They played baseball this year. They were the only couple black kids on the team.
Okay.
And all the teams that we played were all white. So it seems like for whatever reason, they're gravitating more towards baseball and getting away from basketball, and that's the reason why you see it, the low number of whites in the NBA.
Have you seen them compete against white kids who look pretty good to you?
I've seen my oldest son play against. We were in Dallas, and there was a cat from, I want to say he was from Iowa, and he had work.
The game is getting a little lighter. Okay. You know these mixed light-skinned blacks.
Oh no, that's a whole nother.
Yeah, like you. Yo, Chris Broussard be acting like he look in the mirror and see Wesley Snipes or something. Like, Chris, you light, man. What the hell you talking about, man?
Another issue.
He wasn't like that. He was a lot more of him.
When I was in Atlanta, my neighbor moved, and he's like, I'm moving. I was like, why are you leaving? He says, I want my son to be good, and the competition level is too good here. I'm going to a smaller town. He wanted his son to be a big fish in a small pond.
Well, you never.
But it's competition that will drive you to grow.
You're doing it backwards there.
Yeah.
Eddie and Chris, thanks for joining us. Coming up.
But anyway, very interesting segment on Larry Bird. I wanted to include this because you had a lot of great insight on him and on that era. But anyway, peace.